Kate Harrison.
And my name is Sarah Rayner.
And we're going to talk today about our new book, Making Friends with Depression, which we wrote together and also with a third person who can't be here today, Dr. Patrick Fitzgerald. And to start with, let's start off. We're going to talk to each other as friends because we are friends, as well as having written Making Friends with Depression. So let's chat about how the book came about then, Sarah.
Well, the book came about because a couple of years ago I wrote a book called Making Friends with Anxiety, which actually came from writing a series of blogs for a mental health awareness site. And I wrote a series of blogs on anxiety, and the response to those blogs was phenomenal, actually. I was amazed by how many people said they suffered from anxiety, and I thought that perhaps there might be an audience for a little book on anxiety, nothing too long or complicated, but that just sort of explained a bit about what I'd learnt about managing anxiety myself over the years from having had it. But when I was diagnosed with anxiety, I was also diagnosed with depression. The doctor official diagnosis, if you like, was actually anxiety with depression. So the obvious other subject to cover off along with anxiety was depression, but I held off for a couple of years. I felt wary, I suppose, about tackling it on my own and using my experiences to sort of extrapolate universal things from. But eventually this year I decided that I would give it a go and try and pull together some of my own experiences and so on. And so that really leads me to ask you, Kate, how come you came to get involved with this little book?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I saw what you did with the anxiety book and I thought it was really interesting and accessible, but anxiety has never been an issue for me. Depression has. I have had depressive episodes in my life, and so I remember saying to you actually, well, if you ever do one on depression, you might like to get me involved because it's a different perspective. And so I was really glad when you did it. I think also it's a really funny thing that in the last 5 years, maybe a little bit longer, it's become a lot more acceptable to talk about depression. But even so, you feel a bit nervous. I mean, this is the first time I've talked about it publicly in the book because I really wanted to share experiences and what's worked for me, like you did with your anxiety book and in here. And it does make me a little bit nervous because it's something that is a taboo subject and there's so many celebrities that talk about it quite openly.
Yeah.
But you and I don't fall into that category, and we're normal and we have a private life. But I just think that one of the worst things about it is isolation and kind of us coming out and talking about it and writing the book, I guess is one of the things that we really wanted to do.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that then. What we actually want the book to be for people to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, I think, funnily enough, I found writing the book strangely uplifting. You know, I write sort of novels some of the time as well, and but writing about depression, I think, in formulating my own sort of thoughts into some logical structure and so on, actually helped me to kind of get to grips again with what I've learnt over the years in order to then be able to kind of explain to other people. And I suppose that would be the first thing that I would say that I would want the book to do, is to sort of walk people through, if you like, the depressive experience. That sounds very grim, but I think there are a lot of books out there that are kind of memoirs, which many of which I've read and found, some of them absolutely brilliant. But what I didn't feel is in existence, except for kind of on NHS websites and things like that, is a sort of guide as to where to start getting help and that sort of thing. Another thing that I wanted it to do was to give people some guidance really about all the different kind of ways that you can get treatment. So not just different kinds of therapy, but to touch on the different medication options or non-medical medications, if you like, all those things, so that there was a kind of overview, if you like, of how to go about getting help. And then the other thing that I wanted to do was to get other people's perspectives, which is really why, you know, I thought it was great when we decided that we would do this together, because as I've touched on, my experience of depression is one thing, but yours is different, so you brought different things to the book. So
I found when I was reading it, your copy that you did, and then I was putting mine together, that it was really interesting because I felt really sympathetic to how you described it, but it was quite different.
Mm-hmm.
So you were talking about feeling, I think, really edgy,
yes,
and constantly anxious, which then ties in with your diagnosis, whereas mine was much more of a feeling of being in a hole, you know, of like being surrounded. So one of the images that I used in the book is of feeling as though I was kind of drowning, you know, I was sort of going lower and lower and had less and less energy, as being swept up by this tide, something quite elemental. And one of the things I really love about this book, which as you say is different from the previous ones you did, is the fact you've illustrated them. And there's just the most amazing illustration which you've done in here that exactly sums it up, of a person, you know, very blue person in the deep blue sea,
yes,
and being pulled under. And I think that those illustrations as well have helped to lighten the mood. I can say that because I didn't do them, so I can praise yours, but they sort of really just give it a sense that it isn't absolutely all is lost, that depression is a really rough thing to happen to somebody, but actually that some good can grow of it, that you don't completely lose your sense of humour, although it may get a little darker. And I think that that's one of the things I hope that people are really going to like about it.
I think one of the things about depression and anxiety is very similar in this regard, is that when you're caught up in the middle of it, you really feel like you're going to be there forever, and that state of mind is permanent, and it can be really hard to get a handle on the fact that actually you might feel differently in not that far of a distant future. You might feel like you're right in the middle of the deep blue sea, or, you know, caught in a whirlwind or whatever, but actually, you know, it isn't a permanent state of mind.
Often we're not really aware of our thoughts until we face a kind of an issue with mental health, and we're not aware of how our thoughts can really affect our behaviour and vice versa. And I think you explained that so well. And the other person that obviously isn't sitting on the sofa with us, but has a really important contribution is Patrick, Dr. Patrick Fitzgerald. Do you want to explain kind of why you got him involved as well?
I got Patrick involved. He's actually a friend of mine as well, and we've known each other for 20 years. He has a creative side as well, actually, and is also a musician, but he practices as a GP in Cheshire. And I felt part of my concern, if you like, about writing about depression, given that it, you know, can have such serious effects, you know, and some people with it feel suicidal and so on, was that I felt there was a responsibility that came with writing about this subject that I couldn't take lightly, and I wanted to make sure that what we were talking about in the book wasn't too kind of flip, and that it was kind of grounded, if you like, sort of with tent pegs or guy ropes or whatever, by some kind of medical expertise. So I asked Patrick if he would go through the book actually initially and check that what we'd said was kind of valid, but I also asked him if he would write bits of it, because very often, you know, when we're depressed and we're, you know, really pretty bad, we will be dealing with the medical profession a lot, and I thought it would be good to get his input on what it's like to treat somebody, you know, somebody who would go into his surgery, and how he would suggest, you know, that someone came in and spoke to their doctor, and, you know, run through the various kind of options that they might have and so on. And he's also made sure that actually, you know, everything that we have in the book is right up to date with the National Institute for Clinical Excellence guidelines, so we're not saying anything that's sort of too off the wall, and so on. So those are the reasons that I got him involved, and I think he's a very kind and sympathetic person. A lot of people can kind of think, as I have in the past, that, you know, doctors are scary and so on, and that it would be good to have the input of one who I knew wasn't like that, to perhaps take away some of that fear, if you like, of the medical profession for people.
makes a lot of sense. And I think he definitely does that. I mean, I find his writing, even on, you know, the very difficult subject of suicide and self-harm, incredibly empathetic and warm. And I think that actually a lot of people, when I've been talking about the book, have said, that sounds perfect for me, because although I don't suffer from depression myself, I've got a family member, a spouse who is, and I think it will maybe give me some insight. And although that wasn't necessarily what we set out to do at the beginning, I think having kind of looked at it really carefully, I think it does that.
Yeah, and there are some the little tips in there for how to help somebody if they are in that really desperate state, which I hope, you know, will help people to help other people as well. And then taking my lead from your book, we've also got a Facebook group, a support group for people who are feeling that they could do with some group support. It's not run by therapists or medical professionals, it's just support of other people who may have experienced something similar. But I found that can be really powerful and empowering for the people who are giving advice to other people, if you like, and supporting them, as well as it is empowering for people to ask for help. But I learnt of that from you, so perhaps...
Yeah, because I set one up when I first started writing about nutrition and diet, which I also touch about in the book. And I set up a group which started small and is now not small at all. It's got more than 50,000 people in it. And the really important thing to note about Facebook groups is we tend to think that Facebook, you know, you're posting the minutiae of your life, but of course all of our groups are set up to be private, so you have to ask to join, and then once you do, everything is confidential within the group as far as we can. I mean, obviously, you know, within that thing, it's based on a trust situation, that we trust to talk about our emotions and to get the support, and I've found nothing but support from groups like that. And you can find it, of course, if you go to Facebook, if you're on Facebook, by putting in Making Friends with Depression. That will show up the group, but it'll also show our page, which has got some more videos like this on it.
Yes.
And of course, if you do want to find out a bit more about our book, Making Friends with Depression, it's available on Amazon, both as a lovely, neat paperback like this, and also as an ebook. And if you want to take a look at how we tackle the subjects, what's in there, and also some of Sarah's gorgeous illustrations, you can look inside to see it and try before you buy. It's been a bit of a labour of love, hasn't it?
It has, yeah.
And we really hope that if you take a look, you enjoy it and find it helpful.